Heavy rainfall has flooded Istanbul, Turkey, causing mayhem for morning commuters. The storm started in the early hours on Tuesday, July 18th, and by the morning rush hour, the city had ground to a halt. Over 240 pounds of rain reportedly dumped on certain parts of Istanbul. These pictures show the extent of the water on the roads, forcing some drivers out of their cars. And this footage of commuters watching the train lines fill with water gives an idea to the extent of unusual rainfall the city is experiencing. Many buildings and offices are also flooded with water. Istanbul has a population of 15 million, but according to the president of the Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, there have been no reports of casualties as yet. Experts have predicted the rain could continue to fall until Wednesday.
There's a look at significant storm damage in the northern plains yesterday. Newell, South Dakota got hit hard by strong winds, and check out that hail. Winds were gusting over 50 miles per hour, and you can see the damage it did to that home. We're going to see more storms through the rest of the week, and this is for the northern tier of the country. Today, we have an enhanced risk for parts of the northern plains, so we can't rule out tornadoes with this. Aberdeen, Brookings, and even over to Minneapolis. You're going to be looking at that severe weather fire up today and tonight. Now, on Thursday, there's two areas of concerns for parts of the eastern Great Lakes all the way up through upstate New York and then back through the northern plains as well. So South Dakota, you're back in that risk of severe weather, even down through Nebraska and Iowa. Friday, it's the Midwest that will see the strong storm. Chicago, Columbus, Ohio, be on standby for that. Rainfall forecast is showing that flash flooding could be possible, especially in places like Minneapolis, Madison, over in Green Bay and Chicago, where you could get a quick inch of rain. Madison, you could see up to 3 inches.
Thousands of people have been forced from their homes by a massive and fast-moving wildfire near California's Yosemite National Park. 4,000 families have been ordered to evacuate, including everyone in the town of Mariposa.
Fire crews are coming in from all over California to fight what's being called the Detweiler Fire. It started on Sunday, but exploded in size over the last 24 hours. Now it's threatening to cut power to Yosemite National Park.
The fire raced down the mountainside in Mariposa, California, Tuesday, fueled by strong winds and hot, dry conditions. Hundreds of firefighters are working around the clock to battle the flames. Overnight video shows them on the front lines, trying to protect the building from the encroaching wall of fire. You can see the ground still smoking as the crews scramble to keep up.
When you add in the fact that we're in the foothills, when you add in slopes and grades and the temperatures that we're dealing with, the humidities that we're dealing with, it's a full-on challenge.
To the south, emergency crews are facing a new challenge. The fire is threatening power lines that supply electricity to all of Yosemite National Park. The massive wildfire burned more than 25,000 acres and prompted mandatory evacuations. 4,000 people have been forced from their homes as California's governor declared a state of emergency. 1,500 buildings are still in its path.
Everybody's scared. You'd never think something like this would happen in your town.
Isaac!
Even in winter, little rain hit the Spanish countryside. One glimpse of the region's crops and you can see it's bad, although that word apparently doesn't do it justice.
This year wasn't bad, it was catastrophic. I can't remember a year like this since 1992 when I was a little child.
Drought in southern Europe is threatening production of some of the region's most sought-after foods. Olives, almonds, wheat, all hit by the soaring temperatures. The largest cereal growing region has been particularly affected, with crop losses estimated at as much as 70%. Italy is no better. Its Agricultural Association has estimated 2017's drought could cost the nation's farmers more than €1 billion.
When you want to help someone, decisions have to be taken in the very same moment. It's like when there's a humanitarian catastrophe. It doesn't help to send food a month later. Everybody would be dead by then. This is the same. In this region, we are financially choked.
Crops grown in greenhouses also can't be relied upon, with a limit on the amount of water available. One upside on an otherwise scorched horizon, the drought has helped support EU wheat futures, which have risen around 6% since the beginning of June. And as for hunger, a bigger harvest in France should be able to provide for the trading bloc. Cold comfort for countries further south who see rising temperatures as a long-term trend which may threaten the viability of farming.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture said on Tuesday an 11-year-old cow in Alabama tested positive for bovine spongiform encephalopathy, commonly known as mad cow disease, after exhibiting clinical signs at an Alabama livestock market. The USDA said in a press release the cow tested positive for the atypical L type of BSE. Atypical BSE can arise spontaneously in cattle herds, usually in animals 8 years old or older. The USDA said following delivery to the livestock market, the cow later died at that location.
Temple Mount has been closed this morning for visits by Jewish worshippers, this according to Israeli police. It comes due to violations of visiting procedures by one of the Jewish worshippers who was sent to the site. This comes on the back of 4 days of riots by Palestinians following the new security measures, including metal detectors, implemented by Israel after Friday's attack, which left 2 Israeli policemen dead. After various condemnations of the Israeli move from the Arab world, Egypt today urged Israel not to further intensify the conflict, while Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat said that the Palestinian anger should be directed to those who committed the attack on Friday and not to Israel, who is implementing the security measures.
The Palestinian Fatah movement has called for a day of rage over the Temple Mount crisis as clashes erupted in Jerusalem's Old City for the 4th day in a row.
Another riot around the Temple Mount over new security measures last night led to the hospitalization of around 16 people, including 2 police officers. Last night, after evening prayers were held outside the Temple Mount, a group of Arabs began throwing rocks and bottles at the police guarding the Old City, necessitating the use of stun grenades and rubber bullets to break up the riot. According to the Red Crescent paramedic services, up to 34 people were injured in the riot. The Jerusalem police say quiet was restored to the area afterwards, but the unrest in the Old City of Jerusalem has been continual since Friday's terror attack on the Temple Mount, which killed 2 Israeli police officers. New Israeli security measures around the holy site's entrances following last week's attack have provoked outrage from the Jordanian Islamic Waqf and the Palestinian Fatah movement. The Waqf has been calling for Muslim worshippers to boycott the Temple Mount until the newly installed metal detectors are gone, and Fatah has called for a day of rage against Israel today. We'll see if it materializes.
Now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party is urging Palestinians to march towards Israeli checkpoints, also calling for Friday prayers to be held in public squares in protest.
Al-Aqsa is going through an unprecedented phase of vicious campaign by the occupation. We warn them that we will take strong action to defend our rights, and we will not allow the Zionist enemy to violate our rights and sacred houses of worship. The Israeli occupation wants to turn the Aqsa compound into a military barracks to undermine the heritage of the third holiest site in Islam.
A Palestinian man attempted a car-ramming terror attack in the early evening hours of yesterday when he drove his car into a group of Israeli soldiers in Hebron. The attacker was shot dead at the scene, and 2 soldiers who were lightly wounded were taken by Magen David Adom paramedics to the Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center in Jerusalem for recovery. This terror attack comes at the heels of high tensions in Jerusalem caused by a terror attack at the Temple Mount, which resulted in metal detectors and beefed-up security at the Muslim entrances. It's also just one of hundreds of attacks that have occurred since the so-called stabbing intifada began in October of 2015. Since then, 40 Israelis, 2 tourists from the United States, and a British student have all been victims of said attacks. Stabbings, shootings, and car rammings perpetrated by Palestinians and a few Arab Israeli citizens. At least 261 Palestinians and 1 Jordanian have also been killed, with at least 176 of them confirmed as terrorists killed in clashes.
Washington once again sending mixed signals to Tehran. On Tuesday, the US slapped fresh economic sanctions on the Islamic Republic, just hours after confirming that while Iran is technically abiding by the 2015 nuclear deal, it's failing to live up to the quote-unquote spirit of the agreement.
Iran's continued malign activities outside the nuclear issue undermine the positive contributions to regional and international peace and security that the deal was supposed to provide.
18 Iranian nationals and entities now stand accused of supporting terrorism or having links to Iran's ballistic missile program. They've had their assets frozen and been banned from doing business with Americans. But speaking on Monday, Iran's foreign minister defends the country's military program as necessary.
We need them for our protection. We need them for the protection of our civilians. We need them so that another Saddam Hussein around the corner, and believe me, there are quite a few of them in our region. We need them to make sure that another Saddam Hussein around the corner would not come and hit us again. Our missiles are means of our defense. We will never use them except in self-defense. Never.
Throughout the presidential campaign, Donald Trump repeatedly called the Iran deal the worst ever made. But pending a viable alternative, the Obama-era lifting of sanctions will remain in place for the time being.
China has reportedly complained about what it views as a negative content in an annual defense bill passed by the U.S. House of Representatives, which included a provision to expand military cooperation with Taiwan. The annual National Defense Authorization Act, passed on July 14th, proposes expanding military training and exercises and defense cooperation with Taiwan. It also asks the Pentagon to consider reestablishing port calls between the U.S. and Taiwanese navies. On Monday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Liu Kang condemned the provision, saying it goes against the One China policy. He asked that the U.S. reconsider the serious harmfulness of the move. Liu added that Beijing has, quote, already lodged stern representations with the United States. Beijing has long objected to any military assistance from Washington to the self-governed island, which it considers a rogue province.
A pro-Russian separatist wants to replace Ukraine with a new nation. Alexander Zakharchenko is the leader of a self-proclaimed state within Ukraine. He's proposing an entirely new nation, what he would call Malorossiya or Little Russia. The statement could throw a wrench into the already fragile peace talks between Kiev and the rebels. The United Nations estimates the conflict has killed more than 10,000 since 2014. It doesn't seem like Zakharchenko has much support, though, even from his own side. A neighboring self-proclaimed separatist state wasn't aware of the Little Russia idea and said it didn't support it. Ukraine's current president called the rebel leader a Kremlin puppet, pointing to previous Novorossiya or New Russia initiatives by the separatists. Ukraine, Russia, and the separatists have all agreed to send representatives to meet in Minsk on Wednesday.
Another day, another allegation against Donald Trump of secret collusion with Russia. This time the US president's defending himself against claims he had a second, previously undisclosed meeting with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin at a leaders' meal during the G20 summit in Hamburg earlier this month. Trump took to Twitter to rubbish claims of a secret dinner with Putin, with the now familiar counterclaims that the reports are fake news, dishonest and sick. Scrutiny of the Trump-Putin relationship has become almost daily fare for mainstream US media, and thrust under that same spotlight could be Jon Huntsman, who Trump nominated as the next US ambassador to Russia on Tuesday, pending confirmation by the US Senate.
Jon Huntsman, the ex-US envoy to China and one-time presidential candidate, is Donald Trump's choice for ambassador to Russia, according to the White House. It's a high-profile nomination, even more so because of allegations Moscow interfered with last year's elections. The job would require confirmation by the U.S. Senate, and if he gets the green light, he'll start the job while both the Congress and a special counsel investigate whether Team Trump had ties to Russia in his campaign. Huntsman is also the former governor of Utah, and he served in the administrations of 5 presidents. But reports earlier this year that Huntsman would get stationed in Russia were met with mixed reviews in Moscow itself. One politician saying he was, quote, not a dove, while the Kremlin said it would welcome anyone who might improve ties with Russia, a top Trump goal for his agenda abroad.
Je suis votre chef, et je n'ai à cet égard besoin de nulle pression et de nul commentaire.
Well, the statement comes in response to criticism from General de Villiers, the chief of the French armed forces. Now, he reacted furiously last week to an announcement that the military budget would be cut. Petition demanding that the president apologise to the general has now gained over 20,000 signatures. It says Macron used a patronising tone and deliberately humiliated de Villiers.
An early test for newly elected French President Emmanuel Macron. His armed forces chief has quit days after a heated dispute over defence budget cuts. Pierre de Villiers said on Wednesday, quote, I see myself as no longer able to guarantee the robust defence force I believe is necessary to guarantee the protection of France and the French people today and tomorrow, and to sustain the aims of our country. He exchanged fiery words with the president behind closed doors last week, when he fought against Macron's slashing of €850 million from the defence coffers in an effort to rein in state spending. The following day, the pair were seen side by side at Bastille Day celebrations in Paris, where they showed no signs of the fierce exchange. According to sources, de Villiers had used strong language when he appeared before parliamentarians, adding, I may be stupid, but I know when I'm being had. But following the meeting, the president said his defence chief had no choice but to agree with what he says. Macron warned an audience of dozens of top army officers, quote, I have made commitments, I am your boss. As of Wednesday, that's something that no longer applies to de Villiers.
229 votes to 106 as a majority of French senators back a first reading of a new anti-terror bill. A campaign pledge of President Emmanuel Macron's, the bill was created to replace a state of emergency in place since the November 2015 terror attacks in Paris. These measures were extended yet again for a 6th time earlier this month. Within the new bill, several elements have a limited timescale and are only valid until the end of December 2021, such as administrative control and surveillance measures for individuals, home raids, and seizures. Parliament will re-evaluate these measures every year. The bill would also roll back on some measures currently under the state of emergency. For example, the use of security perimeters around sensitive sites would be cut back unless there was a specific threat. Other measures, however, are set to become permanent. These include the monitoring of air passengers and the surveillance of online and telephone communications. The bill is highly controversial in France, where many citizens fear it goes too far in terms of curbing civil liberties. Rights groups, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, have heavily criticised it. The National Assembly will debate the bill in October. If they give it the green light, it would come into force by the 1st of November this year.
It feels like the first question to you after the election result has to be, are you still convinced that Brexit is going to happen?
I think it's
possible now that Brexit doesn't happen. I think it's absolutely necessary that it doesn't happen, because I think every day is bringing us fresh evidence that it's doing us damage economically, certainly doing us damage politically. And I think that when people really reflect on why we wanted to do Brexit or why the country voted for it, then they can see that in respect of the immigration issue, the overwhelming majority of these European migrants who come into our country are people we actually need for various reasons. The question is, can you get a clear sense from the people in the country that the will that they expressed last June is shifting?
But Blair's claims that Brexit should not go ahead come as a poll that he commissioned shows public opinion is mostly in favour of leaving the EU. When asked if Britain should leave the EU, even if there is no deal with Brussels, 56% of respondents said it should. A quarter wanted a deal above anything else, and a fifth said they were unsure. Out of those polled, 75% believe the UK's immigration policy is too open, with just 4% saying it is too closed.
A report issued on Wednesday said North Korea carries out public executions on riverbanks and at school grounds and marketplaces for charges such as stealing copper from factory machines, distributing media from South Korea, and prostitution. The report was issued by a Seoul-based non-government group. It said the often extrajudicial decisions for public executions are frequently influenced by bad family background or a government campaign to discourage certain behavior. The Transitional Justice Working Group said its report was based on interviews with 375 North Korean defectors from the isolated state over a period of 2 years.
Now, a young woman in Saudi Arabia who sparked fierce debate after posting a video of herself wearing a miniskirt on social media has been arrested. The woman, whose name was not given, was detained for wearing, quote, immodest clothes, violating the country's strict dress code for women. The case has split Saudis, with some calling for her arrest, saying she violated the kingdom's conservative Islamic dress code, while others actually praised her bravery. It's not yet known whether she will be charged.
Despite the Iraqi government's successes against Islamic State, as you heard there, including the recent liberation of Mosul, the conditions of inmates in Iraqi prisons reportedly remain dire. At one such prison south of Mosul, over 500 people suspected of having ties to terror groups are being held in rooms with no electricity, ventilation or windows. Many are suffering with severe health conditions brought on by the squalor in the prison, including skin diseases, and reports have also been emerging in recent days that Iraqi security forces are murdering suspected militants over fears they will bribe their way out of the detention facilities.
It's a good time to be an emoji lover. Later this year, Apple users can use a handful of new ones. 2 new emoji generating the most buzz are a woman breastfeeding and a woman wearing a headscarf. This is Apple's latest stab at making its emoji collection more inclusive. Over the years, it's added LGBTQ icons, customizable emoji skin and hair colors, and more sport and job options for women. Other new Apple emoji are more playful, like a dinosaur, a zebra, an exploding head, and even a vomit emoticon for those who feel especially queasy. And for others dying for a zombie emoji, the wait is finally over. Better late than never. Not an Apple user, Google is redesigning a bunch of its Android emoji too. So use those blob faces while you can, because they're going away when its Android O operating system arrives. One emoji we're still waiting on? A freaking redhead. Fingers crossed it can beat out werewolves in the next update.
The long-abandoned Google Glass project is getting a second chance, but not for consumers. Developers said Tuesday the new enterprise edition of the gadget is now more widely available for companies in manufacturing, agriculture, and healthcare. For the past 2 years, companies testing out the new version of Glass have said they've seen better worker efficiency. Companies like DHL and Volkswagen said they like Google Glass because it's hands-free and wearable, which lets employees consult instructions, resources, or even remote video support without looking away. Glass's revival comes 2 years after Google halted sales of the gadgets for consumers. Back then, critics called the project an expensive failure. And in those 2 years, the industry has moved on to other consumer tech built around augmented and virtual reality. For example, take those filters and lenses on Snapchat and Instagram stories. Both use augmented reality to make their apps more appealing, and with over 400 million daily active users between them, it seems to be working. Other companies like Samsung and Google are upping their virtual reality efforts to stay competitive in the growing virtual reality headset marketplace. Experts say AR and VR devices could sell almost 100 million units by 2021. Despite the success of AR and VR tech in the consumer market, Glass will be solely developed for the business sector, and as far as we know, there are no plans yet to expand beyond that.